Welcome again to the Gooder Podcast. I am your host, Diana Fripe. As partner and CMO of Retail Voodoo, an award-winning branding agency, I have worked and met with some of the most amazing women in the naturals and food industries, actually food, beverage, wellness, and fitness. And as such, I decided to create the Gooder Podcast to interview these great people and subject matter experts and have them share their insights, expertise, and passions to help businesses all around the world become gooder. So today I'm very excited to introduce our guest, Brigette Wolf, who is the Global Head of SnackFutures for Mondeléz International Innovation and Venture Hub. Since its creation in 2018, Brigette has led the creation of cross-functional ecosystems of partners around the world, launched SnackFutures, and created 5 completely new brands, ooh, I'm interested, which are currently being piloted in the US and Europe. Brigette has played a key role in advancing the company's innovation agenda since its inception in 2012, serving as the Senior Director of Global Platform Innovation for gum, candy, and biscuits. And prior to being part of the food industry, Brigette worked in investment banking. Hi, Brigette. How's Chicago today?
You know, it was super sunny and then we hit rain. So we're having our 4-season day. But I'll take it. The fall colors are out and it's been glorious lately.
Oh my goodness. Well, welcome. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to chat with me and share about yourself.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you work for Mondelez, but and that's a really big organization. Many of our listeners are going to know who Mondelez is, but we get to talk about it a little bit more in the future or in this next question. But I want to start out with something that you said to me when we first started talking. You said, I'm a reformed investment banker, and I couldn't tell if that was an apology or a confession. So maybe let's start with that. How, or maybe why did you go from being investment banking to becoming a CPG marketer?
Yeah, and it might have been a little bit of all of those. I think it's a balance actually of a sensitivity of the world of finance and the reformed of mergers and acquisitions that I worked in, to really wanting to create and be part of the companies from the inside of their growth. I also sometimes do it as a bit of straight cred when you play in food and the marketing and innovation side. There's a little bit of like, I can do the Excel with the best of them too. And understanding some of those valuations and putting that having both sides, right? The external view of how does the market look at companies, and then how do we think about ourselves and grow? So it actually has been a nice compliment, but it might be a little therapeutic to say I've been reformed.
Well, we all have something in our work history that people kind of go, oh, that's interesting. So that's fine. So you're working within the SnackFutures and the Mondelez family. I want to just quickly, for those that may not really understand Mondelez, the size of Mondelez, just at a really high level, Mondelez is a
$26 billion multinational snacking company. We are one of the leaders in snacks. And Mondelez, as you said, was created in 2012, but the brands have been around for hundreds of years. And you know them by the likes of Triscuit and Oreo and Trident, Cadbury, Toblerone. So it is a beautiful company of these categories with a breadth around the world. And then I get to play in our new sphere in well-being, specifically in SnackFutures that we'll talk about.
Yeah. So tell us, what is SnackFutures?
Yeah, you mentioned it was great. It's our venture and innovation hub. So what does that mean? We create new brands and businesses really from scratch of what's needed in consumers. And then we invest in emerging startups in the well-being space or tech space that we see. So it's both.
Oh, and how were you? I mean, you've been with Mondelez for a while, since 2012. SnackFutures is 2018. So tell us, what is your involvement in the creation of SnackFutures?
Yeah, so my journey through Mondelez was from base business, kind of CPG, traditional marketing. And then I got into the global categories on innovation, like brands of Velveeta and Oreo. And then we moved to these big bet innovations. So if anyone's seen Trident Vibes, we were seeing a shift in the marketplace. We were seeing a shift with our culture. We had a new CEO and some strategy changes. And the biggest thing was the world of consumer needs are changing fast, and the ability to react to them is accelerating. And now
Yes.
how do you anticipate their needs was something that we wanted to get ahead of. And if you're going to say you're the snacking leader, how do you get ahead of that? So for us, the ones that we saw that were doing this the best, to be honest, was the startup community. These were people who saw pain points, lived them, and then fought to fix the problem. And they were going down the alleys really quickly and addressing the consumer needs. And so we felt we actually needed to deliberately think, behave, and partner with them like we hadn't ever before.
So partner with them. So just a little bit more about that. Are you stepping into some of those, you guys, investment? What's the right way of asking this? Like, how involved are you when you say you're partnering with these startups?
Yeah, I would say, so the way we engage with startups is actually, we've been building the foundations with SnackFutures, almost like, year one was find the ecosystem and figure out who we are and how we operate. And then year two is, okay, we built some brands that we can talk about of getting those quickly to market on our own. And then the third was investing. So we've made a couple minority investments to date, Uplift and Q being two of them.
Yeah.
And then we've been doing a lot talking to the startup community more about how do we find more startups to invest in and partner and kind of build on that ecosystem of growing them and ultimately for us.
So this is your baby then, right? This project, this initiative, this division is your baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll talk about why is it important to Mondelez in a moment, but for somebody to take on initiative and build this, there's something drawing you to it. So why is this important to you?
So it's interesting. I would say the ability to actually create the change that you want to create is a really powerful motivator. We're quite passionate about consumers, and it was like, how do we take all those frustrations and things that were bothering us and like just wipe them away and start over and say, how do we want to show up for work and what world do we want to create? So there was a little bit of a work, personal piece. We have a corporate mission and purpose of snacking made right that we joke in SnackFutures. We do everything on steroids for Mondelez. So for us, we actually have a purpose around our mantra is good for people, kind to the planet, deliciously fun, and hyper consumer centric. So our team is embodying that, and we really chose a little bit of like, yeah, there's a world of well-being, but how much of an ethos do we want to do that? And you hear that in startups, right? They have an ethos, they have a core value system, and we got to create that team, which is the other probably more even personal. Like I've got my team, but for me, we architected SnackFutures and figured out some of the operations, the nuts and bolts. But it wasn't until that night before where I did the kickoff meeting, and I'm like, this is my team. This is our vision of how are we going to create it. And having the opportunity to not just get a job and a role to run with, but really a chance to say, what kind of leader do I want to be? How do I want my team to be able to perform and really be a team? What's the culture and the value system? That's the fingerprint that is probably the most interesting and a personal thing, because I got to grow in that area. And as we've been reflecting the past couple of years of what we've achieved, you listen to the team of the pride that they have of their personal purposes being delivered this way, or the way that they operate and can think, and you just see people really grow. And we use the term unleash someone, but to really watch someone unleash and flourish, you see them do that with the other cross-functional team members. You see it with our agencies, and that's been a really powerful psychological shift and cultural, which is great because then we're embedding it throughout the organization on a broader basis.
Well, so that's what I'm thinking is like, as you are bringing a new way of leading into the organization, I'm wondering if the other business units are saying, hey, that seems to be working better over there than what we're doing over here. Are you seeing them coming to you, or do you just seeing a natural adoption as people move around, or how's that showing up?
Yeah, the biggest, let's say, of a business need that came in there was drive incrementality of innovation. Right? Do something that really serves consumers and adds to the business. So the base businesses are now looking at, how do I think differently? How do I have a new lens? And so we're helping them be like in a 2020 lens. What's the world of consumers? Approach your business that way. How do you engage in digital, and how do you sell? And then the speed with which we do things, we see it actually in a lot of elements. Today, the conference calls I've had from Latin America and Europe, they're learning, and we have it in functional areas. R&D is sharing how they work in legal. How do we simplify things? How do we accelerate? It's kind of like, what's the most important thing you need to know? What's the minimum you need to know, and move on. So it's enabling them to start behaving to get that flywheel going throughout the organization.
Yeah. It's amazing. You know, I have this term that I use pretty regularly, and you just are giving an example of it. Your strength is your weakness, right? Like Mondelez is a beast. It's huge by design, because there are so many benefits of having all of these resources and abilities, and then your strength also then becomes your weakness, because now you don't have the ability to behave like a startup, which is its own different set. You know, I was speaking with Janet Lee from PepsiCo, formerly of PepsiCo, and she was talking about some of the initiatives that they're doing internally for this exact same reasons that you guys are, where it's like we get kind of caught up in our bigness and we can't move fast enough. So how do we adopt some of that into our culture? So that's really fantastic. So you've got this, you are then, I guess, I kind of want to ask around this concept of you're designing your own style of leadership and your own style of managing the business. Are you learning anything from it that is surprising for you, or like, oh, I didn't know I could do that? Or, I mean, really, I know this really basic question, but do you walk away with some of those, like, wow, I just launched 5 new brands in 3 weeks, or whatever that might be. I don't know.
I think we had set up, if you saw our presentation at SnackFutures, we'll say, we're pushing the boundaries of what's possible and disrupting snacking, and the what and the how. And I think for us, we took off, we'll be category agnostic, so go where consumers go. We joke about we'll be asset agnostic. If we don't have the assets to all the strengths of Mondelez, if we don't make that good, we'll find someone who does.
Right.
I think what's been so amazing is to see that potential realized, and, or just the networks. I mean, you hear it, some people say leverage who you know. One partner introduces us to someone else, or we hear about something else, and this curiosity of figuring things out has been really just mind-opening of what else can be done, and how. And then, of course, the flip side is how do we minimize the risk and the cost, and do it in baby steps, and manage the expectations of senior leadership of what they want to see. So there's a lot of interesting conversations of that teeter-totter of thinking in a big company, but being small.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're starting with something much smaller, sometimes you have to throw out this concept of, well, how fast can we scale? Can we, you have to just kind of be willing to experiment. So that's fun.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's good to challenge yourself too, right? Like, we all learn from different managers and leaders we've had. What we liked and what we want to get rid of. And we think at one point we all have a view of who I am as a person and what my values are. And this is a way of, can you keep putting that mirror and checking to yourself, are you walking the talk of who you are? And kind of becoming, right, that new of maturing into a new level of leadership.
Well, so we there's a little blending here, like why is this initiative important to you? We talked a little bit, you mentioned a little bit about the importance of this program and initiative. What do you guys call it? A division? It's not an initiative.
A group, I don't know what you want to call us.
Okay. Well, so why is this important to Mondelez right now? What you're doing, why is it important right now?
I would say we are the distinct proof points of so much of the theory that we're talking about and many companies are thought about, right? About, can big be small? Can we move fast? Can we be consumer centric? There was a whole shift with our CEO. We talk about growth mindsets and If anyone's seen the history, we kind of had our first piece of Mondelēz of the international markets fell apart, and we were batting down the hatches of cost cutting and ZBB, and everyone knows all these acronyms. And then there was this inflection of, okay, chapter 2 of Mondelēz is growth. And the piece there is, what does it mean to really take you for growth and those mindsets and behaviors? And it's funny, when we first announced SnackFutures, we had all sorts of pieces of how we were going to operate, and the team, our ways of working. And 6 months later, I was speaking similar startup with a conversation, but now I could say there's Door Kitchen, and there's Ruckus and Co, and there's No Koi, and we've got Kapow. And someone said, "Oh, that was really interesting." I was like, "Why?" He's like, "Well, before you kind of were just talk. Now you have, like, you've done it." And I think for both external partners and startups who look to us of how we've done it, it's tangible, and there's a real belief system now in the employees that this can be done. And the other thing that we try and really disseminate is it's not special to SnackFutures. Anyone can make small changes and just think about the humans, not just consumers. Think about the people that you're feeding, and what are the small changes you can make, or do you really need all these questions answered? And is there a simpler way of doing it? So I think it's so important, because to your comments about what got us here is not what's going to keep getting us going forward. We have to unlearn some stuff, and it's hard when it's always theoretical. And to see it, and now they've got people that they can talk to, and our team is who's done it and what was it like, and we've had mistakes and we've had lots of learning, and so how do we get to share our experiences? And then I would say the passion and the growth and the beauty of it, people are really inspired. So I think it's kind of critical for the company, both on the portfolio we're generating, that business to get them to the size where they need to make a material impact. But at the same time, when you can shift the whole culture, then you can shift all of our base businesses. And really pivot.
Yeah, and you can start using terms like risk in kind of a neutral way, instead of in a, when you're an organization, when you're a company the size of Mondelez, risk is kind of a bad word, and you've got a whole host of people with charts and graphs whose sole job is to mitigate risk. And sometimes you can kill a really good idea because you can prove it wrong on so many different angles, but not see that one spark of this is going to work because of this one thing, So I know it's a balancing act, and those charts and graphs people, we don't want to lose those. We don't want to lose the charts and graphs people, but we really need the gut checkers. We really do. Otherwise we miss opportunities with the human, because the charts and graphs people are all very, but the human component is missing, and super important. So on that note, then when we talk about SnackFutures, in the research that I've done, I see this is not necessarily product and innovation driven. I think I saw other elements like sustainability, maybe a couple of other things. Was that always the intention, or is that just kind of organically coming along the way?
I think when we set up the group, it was to hit on, when we say well-being, holistically, planetary health and people health. And then because we do snacks, it's got to be delicious. So that's where those 3 components come in. We really want to be mindful when you get a chance to start from scratch, how do you do that as, quote, right as you can? So, it's, in some of our cases, all of our packaging commitments at a Mondelez level are to be sustainable and recyclable by 2025. So let's start with everything that we create. Let's figure out how to have that be in the cycle of recyclability. When it comes to our food supply, where are there opportunities that we can do a bonus? It may not be everything of the brand. So on Door Kitchen, we have rescued veggies, and we work with a company, Full Harvest, to figure out how do we do that. When we did Kapow, that brand actually came from, in one of our huge categories is chocolate. Chocolate comes from this fruit that most of the fruit gets wasted in the supply chain, but it's edible. So how do you take the fruit part of the cacao fruit and make that snackable? So there's a food waste piece there. We have a brand that we actually we said, you know what, we have some strategic spaces, one of them being Planet First, where the design and intent was to be sustainable holistically. So it is a carbon compensating product. It is locally sourced, locally made in France, and it's a carbon neutral brand. So that was designed for eco conscious millennials at their aperitif moment. They can socialize, but then they can feel that they're actively participating in a product that was really designed for the planet. So I think that's the piece for us is holistic health is how do we do good all the way around? And, and as these brands hopefully grow, we can give back to the communities and do more social good there too. So that's really exciting of that.
I just, I love that, part of the reason why I reached out to you and this conversation that we're having is one of the goals that I have of this podcast is for us to start kind of bridging this gap between the conventional brands and the natural community, so that all of these consumers that are kind of on the conventional side that seem to be kind of being left behind in this health and wellness education that is just the naturals industry is so deeply entrenched in and strong and build that transition map, and that's what I love about SnackFutures is it's building this language and education for a consumer that has been primarily ignored, and in some instances has the greatest need to be making that journey from where they are to where they're going. Now, nobody says that you need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but how we have to be able to educate people to say this is how you eat this kind of food, and here's how you eat other foods as part of your diet, etc.
Right. The whole portfolio of choice is so important.
Yes. And there was something that you had said about using the inertia of the Oreo brand, or the elephant, so to speak, brand to affect change in healthy snacking. What do you specifically mean by this? And can you share an example of how this inertia is helping the SnackFutures initiatives?
Yeah, I think we have this really nice symbiotic way of the SnackFutures team is sometimes on the bleeding edge of what's going on. And as you said, we're immersed in that conversation of well-being in that space. So how do you translate that back to the masses, which right now that's the power hitters, right? So if we can get the base of the business of that 26 billion turning and churning for good, that's going to make a really big impact. And we already have, in fairness, we have a wonderful impact lead, and we have programs called Cocoa Life that are just transformational when I think about giving farmers livelihood and women in the community the ability to earn their own money, but also educate, and building bathrooms in schools for girls because once a month they weren't going to school. So really amazing pieces that fit the business. And then where SnackFutures can come in is like, we can kind of implement that's so critical. Or we're hearing this, and on this brand, by the way, you guys might want to consider this is like an opportunity perfect for you, and it fits with your brand, and it will totally make a difference, and it can drive that incrementality. It's how we renovate our base businesses to be relevant. And the world of relevance today is a lot more well-being, mindful snacking. The piece to our impact that we have sustainability and mindful snacking. There's actually some wonderful work going on there at the corporate level of mindful snacking, where for someone like me who's a wicked sweet tooth and I inhale food, it's learning how to eat. And I'll give two examples. So one on Oreo, right? We try and tell people like how many Oreos is a serving visually versus grams. How do you start to savor our chocolate and learn? We have a beautiful chocolate called Côte d'Or in Europe, and it's known, actually, speaking of elephants, it actually has an elephant printed on it.
Oh, you're kidding.
I never knew. So we did this in mindful snacking, and they're like, first unwrap it, and it's about using all your senses. Now look at it. There's an elephant on it. That was like the first aha. And then it's smell it, and then take a bite and just let it melt and savor it. And you could have a really mindful experience in one small piece of chocolate versus just bulldozing the whole bar. And I think even in that, helping people, there's nothing wrong with indulgence. And God knows, for me, we need the sweet, but how do we give more choices in a portfolio? How do we teach people, kind of like people say, drink responsibly? How do you eat responsibly? How do
Exactly.
you turn off all the devices when you're eating and you're not just keep shoveling stuff? So there's some cool learning going on that we can talk about. And then when we see things in the market, we can help remind the base business, hey, there's something really cool over here that you guys can play in.
Ooh, so that's kind of exciting. Like it's such a this mindfulness, and a lot of people are open to learning about mindfulness right now. This is a really great time amongst this COVID shutdown to hear from people are open to going, oh, what is mindfulness? Oh, I'm going to enjoy my Oreo, or I'm going to enjoy my kale chip, or I'm gonna, I'm gonna walk across the room and smell my mother baking something, whatever.
Yeah,
Um, and I love that we've got this huge company who's really, at the end of the day, the goal is to sell as much product as possible, thinking about their impact and kind of going, okay, maybe we can be a little bit, we can be responsible, but maybe in a different way,
right,
like, okay, nothing wrong with an Oreo, but let's not sit down and have a whole package in 15-minute
right,
increments,
right.
let's I love that. So, I'm talking to you, I've spoken with other multinationals kind of around initiatives like this. And it's so exciting for me to see all of this work that's being done, this embracing of healthy snacking, healthy eating, healthy lifestyles. Outside of consumer trends and margins for products in this healthier space, what do you think is really driving brands to start caring more than they have in the past? I know this is kind of like
Yeah, no.
hypothetical. You can't speak for the industry, but you must have an opinion.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things happening. One is I like to remind our marketers that, as I said before, like it's not just a consumer, it's not this alien who eats, it's a human being. It's you and your children and your friends and your colleagues. So there's a little bit of reminding us of what's going on in the world of just consumers. We have our phones. We're more informed than ever. We seek transparency. We're looking for food instead of medicine in the formal cases many times, or how do I manage my stress and my sleep
Yes.
through natural stuff. I think there's an inherent exploratory piece of what's the new latest and greatest,
Yes.
mushroom or turmeric or whatever it is that's going to be
Yeah. Mhm.
the panacea for the day. And then the flip side for consumers and small companies who look at the big companies is, don't forget, it's yeah, there's a machine, but the company is made up of people. It's made up of the employees.
Yes.
And I am a mother of two. I am a bit of a fitness junkie. While I love my sweets, I have to manage it on the other side of what
Yes.
we eat. And so there's a human internally in these companies that, what's the world that we want to create for the future of snacking for ourselves and for our families? I mean, I make the running joke, why some of the snack futures brands are so important is, yeah, someone else can do it, but why should my pantry be with someone else's? Like, why isn't
Right.
it, why aren't they these brands? Why aren't they our brands? And so I think it's, you want both sides, and it's really um, reminding ourselves that all these companies still are made up of individual humans who
Mhm.
have their own kind of dreams and wishes and challenges that we're trying to solve for. And it's just, when you break it down to that level, it makes it much more interesting of trying to figure out, you know, right now the world's on fire. How do we fix that?
Yeah, quite literally, right?
How do we do better? And I think now more than ever, I mean, it was starting to build, but now more than ever, I think everyone's just taking a pause of the hamster wheels and all of it, and just being like,
Yeah.
where do we really make a difference?
Yeah. Curious to just I'm wondering, is it the age of the kind of leadership that's coming in that you feel is having the impact, like as Gen Xers are more in there, older millennials are taking on these really big roles, or is it really a drive more down funnel? Like, is it that there's so much input from Gen Z or the younger millennials that are pushing it? As a combination of all of it? Is there just a general openness overall?
I think there is a more openness to respond to what's going on from the historic big companies, mass marketing scale. You had 3 television channels that you got all the eyeballs, and you just put whatever product you wanted through the mass grocery stores, and you controlled the marketplace, right? So that was, I think that paradigm and the recognition of leaders, no matter how old and senior, are realizing it's shifting, because the first piece is small players can access capital and get in anywhere that they want. They can now set up D2C sites and on e-com, and they can access consumers now faster than ever. So all those barriers to entry force the hand of existing companies to think differently and acknowledge that the world is changing. And then you have consumers driving the conversation versus the brands. They're searching and talking about what they care about and who they're recommending. It's one thing for me to put out a beautiful ad, and I do have to plug it. Oreo has put out a recent LGBTQ, I don't know, they call it an ad or a story, which I will send you, is one of the most beautiful pieces of branding and storytelling that you will just cry at the end. But even then, like from a hard selling, it's not going to be the power of that ad itself. It's going to be me telling you and my friends, and like I've seen other people that are like, get the tissues. It's the power of the voice of the consumer that's demanding of brands and businesses. So it's good for business, and it's kind of, where that power is shifting a little bit in the marketplace. And then you get the reality check to talk to the Gen Z and the millennials or your kids. I mean, we look at the world of gaming, and I am just, I never felt so old in my life. I talk to the gamers and the streamers and my own kids now. It's the universe.
I know. I mean, you and I have kids that are sort of close in age, and I look at them, and it's hard for me not to look at them through a marketer's lens. I am their parent, but every once in a while they'll say something and I'm like, oh, okay, I see where this is going, or they start doing something. And we have coined, well, I don't know if we coined it or if we picked it up, but we're calling these kids like the COVID, this generation that is in the middle of this COVID it'll be 2 or 3 years by the time all is said and done, have had to change, had to adapt in the biggest ways of anything that we've ever seen. So I personally think they're going to be the most innovative group that we've seen ever. And it's hard to understand how that's going to be, because innovation now across the line is pretty, every day I'm finding something that's just mind-blowing. But it's interesting that you're saying how much you're saying that these big organizations and big companies are really listening to the consumer. Maybe honestly, for the first time, perhaps it was like, yeah, that's great. Let's collect, 5,000 names about this and this. And now it's like, oh, okay, literally, like, let's listen to them. That's fantastic.
And, technology's enabled that too. The social listening, I mean, the searches on Google, the conversations, you start cycling through the amount of data that's going on, which is, creepy in its own right. But there's a lot out there that starts telling you of where things are shifting versus the old days.
Yes. Well, I'm going to shift just a little bit further into the innovation conversation for just a little bit here. Innovation has been an important part of your career path for the past while. And I know one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, what kind of innovations or trends are you excited about personally in general? But maybe you might is there anything that you're excited about happening within your group that you want to just share right now? Like, I'm really excited about this opportunity that we're moving into. Anything you can share?
I mean, look, I'm so excited, and I'll send you links to all of our websites later.
Yes,
but
please.
The snacking portfolio, it's funny. Someone said, well, did you design it for one? I'm like, well, there are days where my daughter has been out there with her Ruckus and Co smoothie and her Dirt Kitchen bag. And it's, what I love is the ability to say yes, right? And to feel so good about the portfolio and doing it in a way with, all these big companies have integrity for various of legal reasons, but the ethics and the morality that's going behind them is really powerful. Being able to empower our kids to have a voice and do their thing, or to give ourselves more choices, that's super exciting, both on the business but on a consumer side. how I consume these brands.
Mm.
It's funny when you asked, and I was thinking about this. You go to technology and the apps. I mean, what
Oh,
is
yes.
the shopping on my phone to travel and technology and food to we write jokes about from air fryers to this crock pot. And I think in COVID, what
Oh
can
my
you
God.
do? I will say on a tactical basis, I've appreciated, I'm not a massive coffee drinker, but my Keurig, now that I've been home, I can do my cups on demand. And if I want hot water or coffee or tea, like, right, I have helped my neighbor the other day. She's like, do you have a pot? I'm like, I don't make a pot of coffee, like, but I can make you one now if you
Yeah.
want. So
Let's go.
I think the ability to personalize there. What's interesting, I think, in the culture of what's happening now, which is also interesting, we've talked about mindfulness, is um, to the piece that I love the fitness engaging into everything, that there is a trend, this is going to sound silly, of kindness and gratitude and
Yes.
mindfulness and nature. I mean, there are brands now, I look on the t-shirts, right, where it's like, kindness is cool and
Yes.
all the spirituality. So things that are almost a backlash to some of the hyper materialism, and they're still selling,
Yeah, for
but
sure.
there's a language that's coming out in the world about being bigger than yourself. And I think that's where, for business, that's really important, about how do we think about not just the silo of what we do. And we talk about that from, I think you start seeing in the partnerships of industries that, yes, my packaging is recyclable, but if there is not an infrastructure in the community of how do you recycle it, where does it get sorted, where does it get remade, it
Yeah.
doesn't really. And so I think you're seeing a lot more collaborations across industry, which is really cool, because then you have the innovation of the technology
Yes.
of how do you jumpstart it. So who is doing, the sorting or different ways to get better at
Yes.
sorting this and then reusing it, and the upcycling of material. I think those technologies are
Yes.
incredible, from bags and shoes. And I think about lots of times this is going in a landfill, and that freaks
Yes.
me out. I don't
Yeah.
much years ago as I'm so sensitive to it now. So it's like, what else can you do with it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really, really a wonderful thing of like where innovation now isn't just to sell, but it's to sell and have impact, is really incredible. So I think that's probably where I'm the most excited, is to see the innovations there. And then some of the rediscovery and processing in food to make us healthier and cleaner and more affordable. There is still a bit of a pyramid of, the premium snacking of
Yes.
well-being. So I think there's a lot that we can keep pushing.
Well, that's where for me, that is where the sheer excitement for me is being able to make healthy living affordable, because a good majority of the people that live in the United States, most of whom have the greatest dietary health related illnesses, are the ones that can't afford the healthy products. And at the same time, because of where they are financially, they can't also afford to be sick. And yet here they are. So
We, COVID, recession, social inequality, we can go down the list there. For us, it's actually an area that we're exploring. And there was an interesting term too, because it was like, we know this term food desert, but then someone else said, well, there's food swamps. So that the only thing that's
yes,
there is actually the opposite. And
yes,
it is, we're seeing that. How do we help that? Is just going to be so critical for us to solve. And that is a mass problem. That is not a niche problem.
no.
So,
And
that's
that is going to require that cross category, the cross category collaboration. We'll call it the three
yes,
C's that you were
yes.
talking about a little bit earlier, where the technology is, where there's technology conduits that are connecting these things together. One of the things, I'll send you a link. There's actually a startup in Seattle called Ridwell,
Okay.
and Ridwell is a recycling platform that collects things that typically can't go in the recycling program, but there are places that it can be recycled, but it requires you to go there. So
Hmm.
they're the conduit. So every 2 weeks, we subscribe to it. Every 2 weeks, I put in my batteries, I put in my light bulbs, I put in my clothes that are garments that are unwearable, so I can't take them to a Goodwill. My styrofoam, all those things, and they come and they pick them up. It costs
Right.
like $150 a year for them to come 25 times, take this, and then take all the batteries to the battery place and take all the light bulbs to the light bulb place. So it's growing crazy, like crazy here in Seattle. I suspect
That's awesome.
it'll grow, but it's that conduit between the consumer or the B to whatever. And I think that's probably where we'll see a lot of growth here happening
Yeah. I mean,
shortly.
it's funny you say I have a Ziploc bag of batteries because at work there was a slot that I could drop them in, and
Yes.
we haven't been in the office. So I'm like, I'm like, I can't throw them out.
No,
So the bag's just growing.
sitting there. Yes. Whole Foods used to take that stuff. I don't think they do that anymore. It's been a while, but I remember Whole Foods, I used to be able to drop off corks and batteries and light bulbs and, you know, all sorts of stuff,
Yep.
wires. Anyways,
Yeah.
so in the years since you've left investment banking, and I just want to go back to that because I know it's a slightly different mindset. And you've now entered CPG. What has surprised you personally the most about yourself, whether it's a leadership thing or where you've just where you've gone?
Yeah. I think there's the nonlinear. Yeah, I think when you start out, you graduate, and maybe less so now for Gen Z, that they're already hopping all over the place and the younger millennials. Um, but I was still, I'm Gen X. I still came out of like you kind of find your career, and you're making your money, and you go up the ladder. And for me, the investment banking, I had always been intrigued by the combining of industries and company and the strategy.
Mm,
But then when I got into it, I was like, oh, it's interesting. And so now I got my like finance chops and got that there. But I then got back inspired into the consumer, like who do we serve? And I think even then, when I first joined Kraft, it was a linear brand management track that I thought I would have, even jumping in different brands, but quite traditional in those paths. And I think what's been, people say it and it just took a while to kick in of, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. But I think
yes.
part of it too was trying to figure out where you fit in and leveraging your strengths. And,
Mm,
it's, um, we always like to learn and have our opportunities for development and improve
right.
on it. But there's something really powerful about leveraging your strengths and figuring out where they are. Well, your deficiencies don't actually become distractions, right? Like I still have to work on how I say things, diplomatically. Um, but I think my career path from just jumping to saying some things, going into the global role, and just kind of having that world being opened up to me and really enjoying that and having that passion there, and then moving into formal innovation, and then things just kind of parlayed. And it wasn't always a chance, but it's the opportunity of how do you grow further, both in your business and as a leader and as a human. I think like for me, I am probably more mindful, aware of how I impact the organization, others than ever before. And maybe that's part of growing up to true servant leadership of how
Yeah.
am I serving others versus how are they serving me? In the beginning, you're kind of in this, take, learn, why aren't I moving? And I think allowing yourself to go through that journey and reflecting on, it's not always linear, and the growth isn't always in title. It's in a lot more holistic of you as a person. And then you have your impact, and that's kind of
Yes.
amazing to start to feel that you come into your own, and are really, I mean, it's so trite to say, like in that authentic way that
Yes.
you feel like you're in your right skin and you show up to work the way you're designed to.
That's so amazing to hear. Thank you for saying that. I think it's so I think it's so bold when a leader can say, I I I know where my weaknesses, I call them weaknesses. It's whatever, your outages, your whatever. But I sometimes think of my own. I myself am sometimes not diplomatic. I'm a little bit on the more direct and then also bombastic side, depending on how excited I am. And I have found that I am trying to embrace that and work around it because that's kind of part of what makes me memorable to the people that I meet, that people don't remember how politically tactful I addressed a challenging conversation, but the fact that I said what I said, and it was at the right time and the right moment, so I hope that you're having those moments for yourself as well. Yeah. I really thank you so much for sharing all of this about you, and I'm sure we could go on for a while, but we're coming up on kind of the end of time, and there's always a couple, 3 questions I like to do to kind of wrap everything up. We've learned a lot about you as part of and SnackFutures and its role in Mondelez and its importance to you. Maybe I always like to have a little like factoid about either SnackFutures or Mondelez or snacking or something that people can go, oh my gosh, did you know that, I don't know, 5 million people eat Oreos 3 times a week or something? I don't know what that might be,
Yeah.
Do you have a fun fact?
I think what they say is you could stack Oreos around the world and it would go how many it is eaten around the world several times. So we sell billions and billions of Oreos.
Wow.
To the counterpoint, 91% of Americans are looking to eat more vegetables. So your Oreos and your vegetables.
Eat your
so there's
Oreos
a little
and
bit of
your
both.
Hey, there's some innovation there. Can you do a mashup?
You never know. We'll work on sneaking something in there. So.
Oh my goodness. And how are you keeping yourself sane and centered these days?
I discovered paddleboarding. So that was
Oh.
getting up and, I'd say wherever you have an opportunity to be in nature, really without a device, that could be for a hike, it could be sitting outside doing yoga or a walk or on the lake. I found that's a way just to really disconnect and just be for my own self and time and space. And then you just kind of look around and make different connections. That has really helped in breathing and learning how to breathe. Actually, I just heard the other day, there was a great comment, like when things go just haywire, it was a great reframe to think like, how interesting, it's like, instead of the whole week, how can we step back and look at this? It's like, it's just another puzzle to solve.
Yes.
And, we just have gotten, we're smart people. People say you're designed to solve problems and challenges. So now this is just another life's puzzle. And how do we figure that out?
Are you going on Lake Michigan or where are you finding yourself?
Yeah, I could send pictures. People have a hard time believing it's here because it's got the horizon of an ocean, but
Yes,
it's freshwater and no sharks. And we've been fortunate enough to go where the colors are still changing, and it's just sunrise is calm, and find those moments of quiet. Right, is working parents or just working, and you've got a lot of things to juggle. Find the me time, like the meaningful me time that makes you happy, whether it's baking or dancing or running, whatever it is. There's a luxury right now where some of us are stuck where we are. Fuel your soul with it too, because winter's coming.
That's true in more ways than one.
Yeah.
Well, tell us before we end, if people wanted to connect with you, is LinkedIn your preferred way to connect, or do you prefer a different way?
Yeah, that's probably the easiest and fastest way to connect with me, and then we can go from there.
Okay. Well, I thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I know it seemed like a silly thing to thank you for, but we need more people that care about more people, and the fact that you've got the engine behind you to make a difference in a huge way is a big deal. So thank you for that, and thank you so much for your time, and we'll look forward to the next time we connect.
This was fun. Thank you so much for having me.
This episode is sponsored by Retail Voodoo, a creative marketing firm specializing in growing, fixing, and reinventing brands in the food, beverage, wellness, and fitness industries. If your naturals brand is in need of positioning, package design, or marketing activation, we're here to help. You can find more information at retail-voodoo.com. And so there you go. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to this channel and share with your network. Until next time, be well and do gooder.